I flew to Los Angeles just before the global pandemic caused a citywide shutdown. The Los Angeles Unified School District is the country's second largest public school system, serving more than 730,000 students from kindergarten to 12th grade. It's here where I met Pearl Arredondo, principal of San Fernando Institute of Applied Media. In 2010, she became one of the founders of the middle school, using a pilot reform program at the middle school, one that focused on technology development, improving outcomes for students, and strengthening families. It was the first pilot school established in the district at the middle school level.
We used to be one comprehensive school with about 2,600 students, and students were falling through the cracks. There was no way of really knowing. If I had them in 6th grade, I didn't know who their 7th grade teachers were. They could be clear across on the other side of the campus, and I would lose them. I would never see them again. And so administration changed, and they brought in, what they did was academies. So they set up small learning academies with a different theme. So there was like a visual performing arts, a law and justice, and I was running the multimedia academy. And so with the teachers running the multimedia, we started to see changes because we were able to get to know our students. We were able to get to know their families and their stories. We did a lot of events after school. We put on weekend events for families. And so we started to see the change, and it was positive. And so 3 years into that, our school district decided to come up with public school choice. And so that meant that any entity could write in to take over a school, because we were still failing. Even though we were moving in the right direction, we were still considered a failing school. Test scores and those kinds of things matter. And so when we started the multimedia, and 3 years later, we weren't willing to let it go. We wanted to make sure that we maintained our small academy, and the administration at the time did not want that. They wanted to disband all of the academies and go back to the comprehensive. And we were like, we've been there, done that. Like, we can't go back to the big, it just doesn't work with our students. They were adamant that that's the direction they were gonna go. So as teachers, we said, well, if everyone else is writing a plan, why not us? So we wrote our plan for our dream school. And we put in everything that we hoped for as teachers. It's like, well, what kind of school would you want to work at? Well, it would have project-based learning. It's going to have the social emotional component. It's going to have, so we put in all of that into our proposal, and we knew that we needed help with it. So we joined forces with Youth Policy Institute at the time. And so they brought in the wraparound services for students and families.
And wraparound services are
like the social workers, the workshops for parents, the job training for parents. They would connect them to resources outside of school if they needed anything from help with rent to clothing, food, any of those things.
And then once you come up with that, do you just cross the fingers and hope, or how long a process before you learned you were green-lighted?
So we submitted our proposal in February, and then we opened in September. So it was quite the opening.
Pearl received both her bachelor's and master's degree from the prestigious Pepperdine University. She was the first in her family to graduate from college. It was a huge milestone for a young girl who grew up in a poor East Los Angeles neighborhood. She was raised by a single mother and longtime school district office secretary who saw firsthand the challenges facing students in public schools. So every day, Pearl took the hour-long bus ride to the exact school where she is now the principal.
I grew up in East Los Angeles, and it's predominantly Latino, so I grew up speaking Spanish. I didn't learn to speak English until right before I started school. But I didn't really need to. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. My father was high up there in the gang world, and at the time my mom was too. And so you assume that everyone else lives like that, and that you're supposed to see your dad out on the street getting into fights, or you hear about stories of drive-bys and things like that, and it's normal. And that just stays with you. And so I think, our elementary school was really able to create that safe haven for us where we were able to block it all out. So when we were at school, we didn't think about, the poverty, the gangs, all the other aspects of it until you started moving into middle school and high school. And I think that's why my elementary school teacher, she was like, you can't go to middle school around here. Like you will become one of them. And at the time, my mom was already out of the gang life. She was trying to redo her world, but you still have that pressure and that connection. So even she was feeling, trying to get sucked back in. And it's like, no, I have children now, and these children need a different lifestyle.
You're much more than a survivor. You're a thriver. I mean, you're doing so well. But I guess in that environment, it's really tough because of all the outside influences and the struggles to really get to where you are today, right? I mean, you're kind of a miracle in a sense. There probably aren't a lot of people from your block who are doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and I think it takes a village, because it took a lot of people to get me here. It took a lot of people constantly making sure that I stayed on the right path, because I did challenge it. I did try to follow the path of my father. I did ditch school. I tried to do all kinds of things. But, my mom was consistent, and she was determined to not let me do that. And so as much as I would fight back and hate it and try to sneak out, and she was there to say, no, this isn't going to happen. And so if I need to follow you, and that's what I'm going to do. If I need to call every one of your friends to make sure that you don't go over there and you're not allowed there, that's what I'm going to do. If I need to take your bedroom door off, that's what I'm doing. And so she would do that because we mattered.
Your mom, obviously, still a strong presence in your life. That one
Absolutely.
teacher, though, who took that step, do you think in some respects you're doing what you're doing today? I mean, pay it forward in a sense that she made such a difference in your life that kind of helped with your pathway?
Absolutely. I think I had a lot of teachers who really stepped up and went above and beyond what their job duty was, to come to my house, to talk to my parents about, getting on a school bus to go to the other side of town. Like, a teacher doesn't have to do that. And she did. And she was the one who opened our eyes to other schools and other opportunities. And I think along the way, I found a lot of teachers who did that, who would try to encourage me and find other ways of getting through the school system, that maybe I wasn't able to do it just like everyone else, but they were like, that's not an excuse. And society is not going to care that you can't do it like this. You need to find a different way. And so I remember those teachers, and I wanted to emulate them. I wanted to be just like them. And so, because I think on the flip side, I also remember all the teachers who wrote me off and said, you're not going to be anything more than another statistic. And it's like, yeah, I am a statistic, but a positive one. So.
And the number of teachers who are willing to write off students versus the ones who are willing to really invest. So talk to me about that. I mean, as you look at the education system here in the United States, a lot of people say it's broken. You're a product of it, and you succeeded. But you might be an anomaly in many respects. How do you see the education system, and where are the problems?
I think the system itself makes it very difficult for teachers to thrive and for educators to thrive, because there is just a lot of bureaucracy, and that makes it hard. But I think there are teachers all across the nation and schools everywhere that are doing exactly the same thing that we are. They're just not getting noticed for it. No one's recognizing them. And I think I'm lucky enough to where someone took interest in my story, and now more people want to know. But I think a lot of schools are doing what we're doing. And that's great. That's what we need to do. But it is hard. I think we're combating poverty on every single level, and we need more resources because we're understaffed. We're doing this with very little extra compensation, but we do it because we know that this is the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for kids.
I really needed a support network, a group of people who were going to help me.
In her 2013 TED Talk, Pearl talks about being one of those kids in need of a supportive teacher.
Kids like us, we have a lot of things to deal with outside of school. And sometimes we're just not ready to focus. But that doesn't mean that we can't. It just takes a little bit more. Like, I remember one day I found my dad convulsing, foaming at the mouth, ODing on the bathroom floor. Really? Do you think that doing my homework that night was at the top of my priority list? Not so much. But I really needed a support network, a group of people who were going to help me make sure that I wasn't going to be a victim of my own circumstance, that they were going to push me beyond what I even thought I could do. I needed teachers in the classroom every day who were going to say, you can move beyond that.
Your TED Talk, I imagine anytime you do a TED Talk, there's nervousness about that and stuff, but you want to get a message out there. What were you hoping to achieve with it, and what kind of feedback did you get afterwards?
I think the goal was for people to see that I'm not the exception. You know, that, well, maybe I am, but I shouldn't be. You know, there are a lot of examples of kids who are just like me. And we need to do more so that there can be more kids like me, so that we change what that statistic looks like. And it's very doable, it's very possible, but it does take a lot more resources. And it takes different resources, I think, for us. Because even now, like, we're looking at, okay, how do we fund an extra social worker? So that, because we know that this is a piece that our kids need. And so it's being able to align that with our students, because they need more than what we can offer right now.
Pearl is passionate about increasing student access to technology and closing the digital divide, especially for underserved students.
So is that, you guys are wearing that this Thursday? Okay, let me know what time so I could be there.
She is a tireless advocate for technology-based curriculum that prepares students to enter a global economy.
They are the news team.
Her goal is to make San Fernando Institute of Applied Media a model of educational
You
reform.
guys could be out on location.
What's different today versus when you were going?
Well, when I went to school, they definitely didn't have after-school programs, morning programs. But I think as the years went on, educators realized the need for them, because kids were finding things to do and it wasn't necessarily something positive. And so as every school started to lobby for their after-school programs, we have a morning program that starts at 6 a.m. and then after school until 6 p.m. And so it really gives parents that peace of mind that their children are being supervised, and not only that, but they're doing something of an enrichment. So before, I think after-school programs were just sports. But now they've really evolved into academics, into specialties of drama and video production, robotics. And so they kind of cater to each school and what each school needs.
And those kids need that edge, don't they?
They do, because that's also part of their college and career building. You know, they get a taste for what it looks like now, and then they kind of start to decide what kind of careers they want to follow, what universities they want to attend.
The pandemic has only worsened the achievement gap between children in lower versus higher income families in the U.S. Children in lower income homes may not have access to technology or internet, and their parents, who must work outside the home or hold multiple jobs, can't devote as much time to homeschool their kids while schools are shut down. Even before the pandemic, educational achievement gaps in the U.S. were wide. In 2017, researchers found students from low-income families were 5 times more likely to drop out of high school. Traditionally, underserved students, including minorities and low-income students, are suspended and expelled at higher rates. It's these students Pearl strives to connect with.
Talk to us about your students. Because I think in some respects, many of them carry with them kind of the environment that you came from. You must connect with them in a way that perhaps another principal who comes from an affluent area wouldn't recognize some of the things, which I think will give you an advantage. But talk to us about the students and what you think you bring to the table that perhaps another principal might not.
So I think because I came to school here, that's already a little bit of leverage with my students. And I do share my story about my background and about my parents and, you know, who my dad is and how my mom really made it. And she used to work here, and how, you know, there is hope that even though you are poor and you come from all these different backgrounds or these circumstances that you can't control, but you can control the outcome. You can control what happens from this point and getting your education and striving for something better, because that generational change, that's what we're looking for. You know, we're trying to change those life trajectories so that they don't end up the same. And I tell them, your job is to do better than your parents, and your kids will do better than you. And that way, generationally, you keep moving up.
But the understanding piece of it, because as you pointed out, you know, if your dad's foaming at the mouth and ODing, that's a lot of baggage to bring to school the next day. And you must probably pick up on the students who are struggling and be able to connect with them in a way.
We do. So like morning supervision, it's not just supervision of, are there any safety issues outside? It's looking at our kids, it's knowing their names, it's knowing, okay, this person doesn't look too good this morning, something must have happened before they came into school. Let's make sure we pull them from class, check in on them. Teachers do the same thing. As soon as they come into class, they're kind of scanning the room, they're talking to them about, okay, how are you feeling, what's going on, trying to get a hint of their lives, because they do know their backgrounds. And so as soon as something comes up, it's like, okay, this person's struggling because this is happening at home. And it is impacting now their focus in school. And so it's not about giving them leeway or making it easier, but we do have empathy. And we are working on the whole child. It's not just the academics. And so sometimes academics do have to take a back burner because this child is just not emotionally ready for that because they have too much to handle. And so we try to partner with outside agencies for counseling. So sometimes they come to our campus and do counseling weekly, or family counseling outside of school, things like that, to kind of help them get through life.
You know that you're making a difference, though, with just some of the stories, and I'm sure there are many anecdotes, but I know one story you shared, and I hope you'll talk about it, is a student came to school and had been stabbed, didn't want to go to the hospital. You'd invested in him. He didn't want to. It was just such an amazing story to me. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so I was teaching 8th grade English at the time, and the school climate at that time was very gang infested. And one of my students was very affiliated, and he came to class and he's like, oh, I think I'm bleeding. And he was like pointing to his rib cage, and he lifted up his sweatshirt, and he was all bandaged up, and yeah, he's kind of bleeding through. And I'm like, I don't think you should be here. You should be like in a hospital, the nurse's office. I was like, I don't know, somewhere, but not in class. I was like, I don't think I'm equipped for that. And it was only, I think I was a second-year teacher, and I was like, I definitely don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. He's like, no. He's like, Miss, I'm not going. He's like, I'd rather just be right here. He's like, let me get through the class. Let me get through the day. And he's like, and that's it. He's like, because he's like, I need this. I need to get ahead. And it's like, yeah, you do need this, but you also need to live. Like, I don't want you bleeding out here. But yeah, those are the stories of our students who struggle between the two worlds, between trying to be, you know, in the academic realm, but they're also so entrenched in this other world that they don't know how to let go. And sometimes trying to let go is dangerous, is more dangerous than just trying to be an academic.
I knew that you got somewhat emotional when you were talking about your mom and the sacrifices that she had to endure to see the success here. And we're a decade in, and it's been enormously successful. Have you ever had the heart-to-heart with your mom where you've been able to tell her, man, you made such a difference in my life? And
no, absolutely. I think, you know, my mom and I are really close now. And that's what I tell, like, a lot of my parents that come and they're struggling with their kids. They're like, they won't listen. And I'm like, I get it. I was that kid, you know, and I almost feel like having my mom come and give some workshops. I'm like, well, what did you do when I wouldn't listen to you? And you know, and I thank my mom all the time, because there's no way that I would be here if it wasn't for her being so relentless. And as much as I hated it when I was a kid, and it was the worst thing in life ever, but now it's like I understand why she did that, and I'm super grateful.
Well, you're a precious pearl to her, I'm sure. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.